Hello everyone, Sam Tremlett here from Golf Monthly and welcome to West Hill Golf Club and this video in which we're going to be looking at how far golfers actually drive the golf ball. Now we all know some golfers out there who seem to underestimate and very much overestimate how far they drive the golf ball on average. And so we have collated some data through Arccos Golf in which we've looked at some average distances across a variety of variables like age, handicap and as well as gender. At the end of the video, we will also look at some tour player distances to provide a bit of comparison to the average Arccos user. Now, before we get to the data, there's a couple of things we should mention. Firstly, the averages you will see are total distance and not just carry. And secondly, because the data has come from Arccos Golf, it reveals how far golfers are actually hitting the ball in terms of competition and not just in terms of practice or the driving range. These averages also take into account things like weather and ground conditions too, so they should provide a true and clear picture on how far golfers are actually hitting the golf ball. Now let's get started and let's look at the men's data. Starting with the men, as we transition down this golf hole, you will see the average distances pop up. Now what you're seeing here are the average distances for golfers aged between 25, 35, 45, 55 and 65, as well as players with handicaps ranging from scratch to 15 to 30. Now hopefully the colour coding we've provided will help you find out where you fit into those numbers. So there has been a decrease in men's driving distance of about 5 yards since 2018 across almost all ages and handicaps. But as male players improve and get lower handicaps, their distance goes up by an average of 30%. And finally, in the age brackets of 25, 45 and 65, the average difference in distance between how far a 30 handicap player and scratch player hits it is around 30%. Therefore, this suggests that a player's ability, not age, is the clearer factor as to how far they hit the golf ball. And this would suggest that, broadly speaking, technique trumps basic athleticism. Now moving on to the women's data, once again be sure to take an in-depth look at the numbers as we present them. The caveat here is that the handicap and age ranges used for the women's data compared to the men's are slightly different. In the women's age ranges, they go from 30 to 40 to 50 to 60, and the handicap ranges go from scratch to 10 to 20. Once again, we hope the colour coding helps you look at where you fit into those numbers. So now we've picked up 3 key findings from the women's data. For example, there is a steeper decline in distance from female players as they get older. Women gain distance off the tee at a greater rate when their handicap lowers compared to men. The data shows that this gain can be as high as 45%. And finally, the difference in driving distance between scratch and 30 handicap golfers is 15% larger with women than it is with men. Now with all those numbers flying around, it can be quite difficult to discern what they actually mean, and so we've looked at 3 key takeaways from the data. Firstly, in male players, there has been no significant increase in driving distance over the past few years. Additionally, as male players get older, they decrease in driving distance at the same rate, regardless of handicap. And finally, the point we made earlier about ability trumping age, it's a really important point because it stands to reason that if a player is able to pick up a few extra yards, through ball speed, through club head speed, then chances are they should be able to bring their handicap down and play better golf. Now finally, we wanted to give some perspective on how far the touring professionals hit it as well. So we picked up 5 notable players on the PGA Tour and LPGA Tour as a kind of comparison to how far the average Arccos user hits the golf ball as well. So in terms of the PGA Tour, Lee Westwood sits in the middle of the rankings with a current average driving distance of 295.4 yards. Currently leading is obviously Bryson DeChambeau at 320.9 yards. World number 1, Jon Rahm, rounds up the top 20 at 307.7 yards. The first dip below 300 yards comes in the 59th spot in the rankings. That's JT Poston, and he averages 299.9 yards. The final player we want to mention is Open champion Collin Morikawa, who interestingly is down in the 114th spot at 294.3 yards. Now there are 55 players between JT Poston and Morikawa and only 5.6 yards. This suggests that players who supposedly don't hit it that far, according to the tour average, are still averaging nearly 300 yards. Moving on to the LPGA Tour now, the player who sits right in the middle of the distance rankings is Scott Gemma Dryburgh, who currently averages 257.7 yards. Anne Van Dam is the furthest with 292.1, whilst world number 1 Nelly Korda is at 273.5 yards. The woman she displaced at the top of the rankings, Jin Yun Ko, is actually below the LPGA Tour average at 257.5. And finally, Charlie Hull and Georgia Hall both average 265.3 yards. So there you have it. If you enjoyed this video, then please leave a like below. And and we would be fascinated to read some of your comments on what you think about the Arccos data and whether it corresponds to what you've seen on the golf course and what you experienced whilst you're playing. Until next time, thanks for watching.